Good evening and welcome to the Senior School Parent Information Night. I think most of you know that I'm Jenny Malloy and I'm the head of Year 9. We acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. We pay respect to the Wurundjeri elders, past, present and emerging, and extend this respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait people from other communities who are here today. It is my pleasure this evening to welcome everyone to our Parent Information Evening. There are many staff members here this evening that I'd like to introduce you to. I have Mrs. Merrin O'Connor, who is the Deputy Principal of Student Wellbeing, Mr. Robert Marshall, Deputy Principal of Culture and Strategy, Mr. James Brown, Head of Performing Arts and Student Leadership. James is up the back. Mr. Paul Gilby, Head of Humanities, Miss Elka Gainsler, Head of Learning Plus, and Mrs. Vicky Marinelli, Head of Arts. Mrs. Marinelli is also 9 Davis House Tutor, so a good opportunity to introduce yourself to her this evening. I'm just going to say a few words before we get started. And first of all, it's so lovely to see parents face to face tonight after the conversations that we had in 2021, which were predominantly over the phone and via email. Last year, I was very excited to learn from Mrs. Carroll that I would be taking the girls from Year 8 into Year 9. And I feel very much that it has been a win-win for both the girls and myself, because I know the girls very, very well, and they know me quite well. So that's just, I think, fostered for such a fantastic start to the year. This year we welcomed 7 new students and their families into Year 9. Some are local girls and some are regional girls. We have 2 girls boarding with us this year at Year 9. Please make new parents welcome this evening, and I'm sure they'll feel very much a part of our community. The Year 8 girls ended the year, term 4, on such a high, and after such a lengthy time in lockdown, they returned to school with such great enthusiasm. Of course, they'd had enough of lockdowns, they'd had enough of being home, and they were so eager to catch up with their friends, check out their new space in the Year 9 area, start their electives, compare their timetables, and basically get down to business. You may know that in the lockdown last year, I sent the students a Sunday night email. You may know that, you may know not. In the level meeting the other afternoon, I asked them the question, is it worthwhile me continuing to send the Sunday night email? It was like being at a football match. The response was a resounding yes. So now I'm back, due to popular demand, sending a Sunday night email. And it is quite good because I just outline what's happening for the upcoming week. It was interesting, during lockdown last year, particularly during the winter component of the lockdown, a lot of the girls have told me that they waited for the Sunday night email and read it in bed. So at least they were getting the information. And perhaps that's one reason why they are so in tune with what's going on. We have been encouraging the girls through our level meetings since school started to get involved and to really participate in the breadth of the co-curricular program involving music, sport, clubs and trips. To get the most out of school, could I please encourage you to ask your daughter to consider signing up for music, rejoining a choir, taking a music lesson, signing up for GSV sport. It's never too late. We've signed up 4 new girls for tennis on Wednesday and we had training last night. So please don't think the term has escaped you. It hasn't. So we would encourage you certainly to get your daughter to sign up. As we know, the busier they are, the less chance it is for them to get up to mischief. Not saying that they would, but they are teenagers. Tonight we have presentations from Mr. Marshall and Mr. Gilby, Head of Humanities. And it is now my pleasure to introduce Mr. Marshall, Deputy Principal, to address the Year 9 parents. Welcome, Mr. Marshall.
Thanks, Jen, indeed. And I have to concur. It is great to see people face to face. I mean, we're just all over Teams, and I wish we could all get rid of these a little bit quicker. But, and in fact, I reckon we've had a fabulous start to the year. I think students, teachers and yourselves we're just full of hope and optimism that we're going to be here every day this year. And I don't think there's much appetite in political circles for more lockdown. So we're feeling pretty confident that it's going to be business as usual. And it's just so great to be back. And in fact, it's just been a wonderful, smooth start. The girls have just been a delight. As some of you may know, I was a Davies tutor last year, but I've been dropped off the team this year. I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure how I did that. So I know a number of your daughters very, very well indeed. But what I would like to share with you to start with tonight, some of you, at least I'm hoping all of you, will have seen this document at some part, which is the towards 2025 strategic plan. And I don't know whether you've taken time to look at it. It is on the website and you can download it as a PDF. So you can read that in a little bit more detail a bit later on. But there's been a lot of time and effort over the last 2 years developing this. And sometimes people think strategic plans are just pretty things to put on posters and glossy booklets and all that sort of thing. But actually, we take very seriously the education of your daughters and want to make sure we stay the great school that we are and delivering great programs for the girls so they can thrive and flourish. And when they leave school, be ready to embrace whatever the world's going to throw at them. So what we're focusing on this strategy document are 6 areas that you can see up there. And what I would really like to focus on tonight is academic achievement. As you may know, I was responsible for teaching and learning. I've done a little bit of a shift in roles this year, and I'll talk a bit more about that later. But the academic achievement, that's our core business of why we're here. And it's a very important function, that day-to-day business of being in the classrooms and caring for the girls. And so where we started from, we wanted to think about the graduates that we're going to have with our girls when they leave. So in 2025, the girls who are going to leave the school, what are they going to look like? And so we really set about thinking about that. And so what skills and knowledge, what key learning attributes do we want those girls to have? What do we wish for them to possess when they leave? As such, we want them to have a really comprehensive toolkit of skills, and particularly thinking skills, which is the more you talk to businesses and people in whatever field of work, these are the qualities that people are looking for these days, not people who just remember facts and figures. And while that's an important part of learning, there's far more to being a successful learner than just recall of information. We also want our graduates they want them to work confidently as individuals within a team environment. We want to have an inclusive outlook with a strong sense of community service and a strong sense of community, because that's really one of the key features of this school. We are an incredibly tight, close-knit community. And in fact, one of the things about last year in the Year 8 girls, I think we're extremely lucky that we still managed to get away on a trip up to the Northern Territory and Alice Springs and the Red Centre. And I was very fortunate to go on that trip. And I remember taking a photo of these girls here. It was a fabulous trip. And really, we somehow snuck in that window between the 2 lockdowns. We're incredibly lucky to do that. And so being an optimist, we're hoping for the Year 9 girls to be able to go to these programs later in the year that are planned, that you would be aware of, to Ningaloo Reef and Kakadu. So we're crossing our fingers that they'll still go ahead. We're pretty confident about that. But if you let me depart from the strategic plan for a moment and let me brag a little bit about our great VC results. And in fact, I hope you don't you'll forgive the opportunity to take a little bit of a celebration. But we actually had an extraordinary year last year with our Year 12s. In fact, I think generally across the school, all the way from ELC right through, we functioned spectacularly well. And one of the reasons that we're able to spin on a dime in terms of going to remote learning and back again, we're pretty sophisticated use of technology here, but and I'll talk more about that in a moment. But on Monday this week, we had an assembly for the Year 13s, our last year's class of 21 cohort, where we celebrated with the ducks, or the 2 juices of the school, and the subject prize winners for the VCE. And we interviewed the girls, some of the girls as well, about their learning journey and how they did so well. As you can see, we did do spectacularly well, and it's something we are incredibly proud of on behalf of the girls, because at the end of the day, they're the ones who did the work, but we also had a rather talented and very dedicated team of staff who worked incredibly hard. And it was really clear that those girls last year, their level of independence that they were able to bring after 2 years of COVID and lockdowns and things. And you'll have heard it lots of times, but how resilient they were, how creative and bold, and I suppose courageous. Now, those, you can see there the words on the left-hand side of the screen there, and we've chosen them as key words for our school. And they're not just glib words to put on a prospectus. They're actually things we really believe are important character traits for our students to possess. So you can see how our students did exceptionally well. Now, one of the things I did over the holidays, as after the results came out, I'm a little bit of a data freak, and I poured over the data, and I've written about I think it's about a 45-page report analysing all of our data. And one of the questions that I kept asking myself, how come we did so well? Like, we really did do spectacularly well. I thought our results would be better last year, but not quite to the extent they were. And you might be thinking, oh, perhaps they were just a really bright group of students who went through school. And yes, they were bright, but I've dug right into the data, and so have quite a number of other staff. And they weren't particularly any better or worse than other year levels that come through in the past few years. And so this is what we've distilled as to how our students have done so well. And the best phrase we've come up with is we have academic care, which is that really encompasses the teaching and learning, but also the way the teachers are supporting the students. And you can see there are a number of things. Our teachers last year, and especially the VCE teachers, were spectacular in their care and attention, but really it was all of the teachers right across the school. Particularly, my main role has been up in the senior school, and I just know every single teacher from year 7 through to year 12, their level of support and consistency around that support, emailing students on the weekend, ringing up parents quite often. There was lots of that going on. You know, Jen talked about the emails. I don't know how many phone calls you must have had last year with parents, weekends, evenings, during the day, and that was the dedication of the students. We actually have extraordinary teachers. So the teacher mastery, you might, any organisation has some people who are more talented than others. I can genuinely say, hand on heart, we don't have a dud teacher here. We really don't. We have an extraordinary group of teachers. Is that you, Vicky? I hope you're saying that. No, and that's not just a glib statement, but we have a really supportive, dedicated, talented group of teachers who all they want to do is do the best for the students in their care. Their pedagogical expertise or their teaching expertise, over the last 3 or 4 years, we've had a committed program working with the University of Queensland on the Teaching for Thinking project, and I'll mention that again in a moment, where we have been really clear about how do we teach, what are the ways that we go about doing that, sharing the way we do it with our colleagues and so forth. Our community is really strong here. I know I lost track of how many conversations I had with parents last year, and I think every teacher is probably the same, particularly the teachers in the wellbeing area. Merrin's in charge of that area. And I think apart from just the teachers, but the wellbeing support by the heads of year and house tutors, I think that was a fundamental reason why our girls carried through the school so well last year. Sorry. That one thinking classroom I've mentioned. And then, of course, we've got the student care. So, yes, they were a bright group that went through. No, they did work hard. There's no doubt about that. They really did. And maybe by being in lockdown a fair bit of the time, they weren't going off to that endless round of 18th birthday parties that year 12s can do. And so they were at home. So there was the right scenario for them to get engaged in work. But so was every other school in Victoria. And we actually came out well ahead of every other school, every other girls' school, certainly. And when you look cross board, it was just a great year. So one of the things, yes, we had great successful results, but it's not just about the numbers. It really isn't. There's so many other things that are as important in terms of wellbeing, happy students who are keen and engaged in what's going on. And I look at this picture here of Simone Schulte, who some of you may know, and we often talk about a teachable moment. You only have to look at that photograph to see these lovely girls and this teacher. I assume this is part of the science lesson down here in Barbrack, really focusing on something. You can just see the engagement, the absorption there. So, and I suppose that epitomises what we're always trying to do while we're here in the senior school. Now, I would like to sort of go across a few key staff of you for this year. Jen's already introduced her here, but I can say, having worked with Jen, because I've been a house tutor for the last couple of years, always with Jen as my boss, and it's one of my highlights of my day when I have the tutor group. And I can say to you, you have got absolutely one of the best operators I've ever seen in my whole school career, looking after your girls. And I don't say that lightly. She knows your girls inside and out, and if there's anything that's going on, you'll be the first to hear about it. The good, the bad, the indifferent. We hope it's good most of the time, but we do have wobbles along the way. And she does her job exceptionally well, so you should contact her if there's any concern whatsoever. Couple of other key personnel across the school. The heads of faculty are really important people. If you've got any concern or any question or anything you just want to find out about what's going to school in terms of your daughter's subjects, we have Marianne Keriotis, who's the new head of English. Sari Lloyd, who was head of English, has stepped up in another role, and I'll come to her in a moment. Angela Clantic, head of maths. Paul, whom you're going to hear about in a few minutes, with a very exciting project he's running in the school this year, head of humanities. Vanessa Jackson-McRae, head of science. Vicky Marinelli's down the back, she's head of the arts. Head of languages, Miss Anna Pianezzi. Elka, where are you? You're in the room somewhere, or you were? Perhaps she might have gone up north. So head of learning support, Learning Plus we like to call it, very important role in the school. In fact, a number of the learning support girls who were in year 12 last year ended up with ATARs above 90. You know, and I could imagine if they were in other schools, they wouldn't have done nearly as well. So the support for those girls and nurturing their learning all the way through, Elk had a huge amount to do that. And then we got Sam Basford. Not sure, no, she's not. She must be up at one of the other year 11 weddings. She's acting head of phys ed this term. And then Sari Lloyd, who you may know as head of English, she stepped in to be in charge of the teaching and learning role. And English has been the #1 faculty in terms of VCE performance year in, year out. In fact, our English results are nothing short of absolutely stunning. I think it's close to 40% of our girls get above 40 plus. So that's an A plus. That's really what that means in old-fashioned language. And that's when you think every girl has to do English, it's a compulsory subject. The fact that the English faculty can get the students up year in, year out. And I often say to the students at the start of the year, they often say, oh, I'd like such and such a teacher to teach me this year in year 12. And I can honestly say to the students, and I do, you know what, makes no difference you get because they're all fantastic. Every teacher gets amazing results. We've also got the Dean of Academics, Kanako Yakuchi. She's new into that role as well. And so her responsibility is overseeing the VCE, particularly all the administration behind the VCE, and there's a lot of that, looking at the data, keeping an eye on what VCE teaches well. So she and Sherry work very closely together. But Kanako actually has, it's not just the VCE, she spreads her wings down into the rest of the school as well. A few other people you should be aware of. Mr. James Brown is down the back, and he's getting very excited because we've got the Black Box Theatre near completion, and that, and I'll show you a picture of that in a little while. He's head of performing arts. Mr. Nick Racina, head of sport. Mr. Collins, head of music, and again, Marianne Keriotis, head of debating, which is a very strong feature of our school. So there's a few names there. This slide presentation, we're recording this, so this will end up on the website for you anyway, so if you're not sure of some of those things. So coming back to our strategic plan for a moment, this is what we are really aiming for. We want all of our girls to thrive. And I think that's what it really encapsulates where you want people to be, you know, to be flourishing, to be engaged, to be confident, to be positive. And one word that sums that up is thriving. We want them to thrive in their learning and their well-being. And if we don't get the well-being right, well, you can forget about the learning. And well-being comes first, and then we've got the teaching and learning. And so those 4 words that keep cropping up on the slides there, bold, independent, resilient, and creative, we haven't just picked them out of a hat. We really have thought about what do we want our students to look like. And so these are 4 words that keep resonating with all the conversations for teachers, with all their planning. What would we do? How do we teach so that our girls will be bold? So they're going to be independent, resilient, and creative. So there's a lot of time and thought going into that at the moment. And Paul's presentation will respond to that in quite a significant way. For the last 4 years, we've been working on a Teaching for Thinking project, and this is very much part of our strategy. We've been working with the University of Queensland and looking at a project where how do we get girls to think? How do we know if they're thinking? I won't expect you to read all of that now, but there are 3 big questions that drive that. If we want our girls to be successful learners, from a teacher's perspective, how do we know when students are thinking? Not just memorising work, but really thinking, grappling with problems. How do we know that? And as teachers, how do we plan for that? And as teachers, students do work, they do assessments and so forth. How do we give feedback to students to support them in their growth with their thinking? And these are the three really big questions that are driving pretty well everything we're doing at the moment. And to give you a little bit of an idea about what we mean by thinking, you can sort of break, often you think about thinking is, schooling rather, is about, we study for exams, and exams are all about rote learning and remembering. The VC has changed quite a bit from perhaps certainly when I went through it, where a lot of it was just recall. A lot of the VC exams now are about analytical skills and problem solving. You need to know the material for sure. And for example, in chemistry, you've got to know all the elements and those. There's a bit of remembering, but you've got to be able to apply that knowledge. You've got to be able to evaluate, and you've got to be able to create, reinterpret that knowledge and create it in different ways. So this is what we are on about. Remembering is one part of the thinking process, but so are all these other attributes as well, where we want students to understand what they're doing, not just recall it and then a week later forget about it. We want them to really know and understand what they're learning in the classroom. And so as part of that, towards the end of last year, certainly in term 4, but a little bit of term 3 as well, all the faculty sat down and thought about, well, what does that look like for us? And so what we came up with are these competencies that we want our students to develop. We want them to be able to recognise the processes, in other words, being metacognitive. We want them to acquire, we want them to be able to organise their own learning and understand how they go about doing that. We want them to take responsibility. We want them to be able to act with the knowledge they're learning, certainly working with others. That's one of the most critical things here. We want them to do purposeful practice. You might have heard that saying, practice makes perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. So we want the girls to be very deliberate in their rehearsals for learning how to do various things, and we want them to have really high skills and competency. So moving on from that, particularly for Year 9, which is of interest to you, each of the faculties has developed what we're calling a signature program. And Paul Gilby's going to share one of them in just a moment. And so what we've done here, and you can see there's a few there, and I won't go into all of these now, but for example, in the health and physical education faculty, they are partnering one of the elite football teams in the AFL with the intent there of looking at how do teams train for high physical performance, and particularly examining the data behind that and having an insight into the injuries that take place in the ASL. So we'll be working with people from one of the football clubs, and this will be a program for the Year 9 doing the Advanced Sports Science unit. And so each of the faculties have been developing a look up there with the arts, and they're making connection with industry, with Monash University, I think, Vicky, if that's correct. Okay, so that's what's in the plans for the Year 9s this year. But what is very exciting is Paul Gilby, and I won't steal his thunder, but the project they are doing in Year 9 is rather extraordinary in the humanities faculty. So I'm going to hand over to Paul, and he'll share with you some of the thinking, the planning, and actually what's happened even today in the classroom. So please welcome Paul Gilby.
Well, thank you, Rob, and welcome everyone. After that wrap, you're probably going to be highly disappointed with what I'm going to present, so apologies. I am the head of humanities, and along with Jenny and many other teachers, we've been teaching humanities for many, many years, and we were very excited to think about how we might bring a new model of teaching and learning into the humanities. And I've got some pictures of one of Eton College and one of the Phillips Exeter Academy in the United States that were not the stimulus for our thinking. Our thinking around what we were going to do came from the teachers. We actually were interested in pedagogy, but there was a connection with the principal, Michelle Carroll, had visited Eton in 2019 and was able to view their Learning Innovation Centre, where students were being taught or were conducting classes in humanities and in other faculties in what's called a Harkness model. Now, that's just a name that comes from the other school, the Phillips Exeter Academy. And the Harkness model is really around the table that you can see those students sitting around. There are other names for it, Socratic seminar, but essentially what it involves is handing to the students the power and the opportunity and the space and the skills to discuss and have dialogue about what they're learning about, and they direct it. Now, that needs a lot of structure, it needs a lot of planning, and we've spent the last half year getting to where we are now to run this program. I'll go into a little bit more detail about it and how that looks. So essentially, we're drawing on the knowledge of schools, independent schools that are high performing in the United States that use this, and of course, Eton College, who I've also spoken with the Director of Teaching and Learning there and discussed what we're planning to do, and we've had this ongoing dialogue with them about this. So basically, before I get into what it looks like, there's sort of a bit of information there, but essentially we recognise that students, and particularly girls in Year 9, by the time they reach Year 9, they have very good informal communicative skills. They can talk comfortably, they can conduct conversations, they're very comfortable encouraging each other to have conversations, but they lack that bravado that you would see in boys at that age when it comes to academic discussion. They frequently demonstrate doubt about whether they have the right answer, that they need the right answer to proceed with further discussion. And what we want to do with this program is to break that open, to give the students, the girls in Year 9, the capacity, the knowledge and the skills to advance conversations, to argue in a way that gives them comfort, but also control. And so that's something that, of course, will give them a great deal of confidence when they're going to VCE, because we get excellent results. And that we've traditionally always got great results at this school, but it perhaps can come at the cost of the students' well-being, in the sense of course, we care for their well-being, but that tension about having to really demonstrate high-level knowledge. So we want to try and change that dynamic at Year 9 so the students are much more empowered when they reach VCE and they feel much more in control of their learning. So we're going to give the students the skills to discuss, debate, defend viewpoints. And we're going to use geography and history, which is mandated curriculum. What's fantastic about it is it's just rich with real-life problems that the students have to deal with and think about and discuss. Now, I'm conscious of giving, I might move through this a bit faster than I'd like, because I'm conscious of giving Summer some time at the end to talk about her journey as Year 12. But why are we changing this? We want, as I said, to build this confidence in students in terms of driving their academic learning. And all of those competencies that are on the side of the slide are encompassed in this new style of learning in the classroom. It's really about making students aware of the way in which you can have discussions that advance their understanding. So it doesn't really make much sense until we start to get into what we're trying to change. And then when we start to look at some pictures and start to look at some images of this, I think it will start to make more sense to you. What we're planning to do is to obviously change the pattern of classroom teaching. And I'll get to some diagrams about that in a minute. We will still retain much of that classroom traditional teaching, which is what we would call direct instruction, where the teacher explains material and guides students through the work. However, we're going to step back from doing that all the time, and we're going to hand it to the students to take the knowledge that they need to learn, to process that themselves and work through discussions about that, in running that themselves in classrooms. The classroom architecture and design is looking different. What I'm really excited about, I think we're all excited about, when I spoke to Principal Michelle Carroll and with Rob Marshall's ideas last year, we said we want the rooms to be different. We don't want them to be classrooms in the normal sense of the word. When you walk in there, it doesn't feel like you're in a traditional classroom, because it's not a traditional way of doing things. And we'll see that shortly. We also made a decision to reduce the class sizes from what would be normally 17 or 18 students. We still have very small class sizes generally at this school, but to bring them down to 12, and we've been surprised even in this first couple of weeks, just that difference in the class size in terms of the discussions has been quite significant in those classes. And we really want to see a change in the way the students see their role in learning, not just as the passive receivers of the classroom teacher's knowledge, but actively engaged in the construction of knowledge and deconstruction of knowledge. So we want them to be bold and resilient in their conversations. What does this look like in the classroom? I'm going to jump to a video that I hope will play. I'll just pause it for a moment. And this comes from the Phillips Exeter School in the United States. And it shows slightly older students, but in the process of Harkness discussion. And this is what we have designed and what we're working through a series of planned processes this year for the students to be involved in. So this gives you an impression of where we're headed.
All right, we're going to get started, Steph.
He thinks that because after the first revelation, it talks about how there's a long period of time where he did not get anything from God.
More attention that allowed him to use his poetic skills to actually convey his message.
But are these his words? Why is it that she says, "You always come from to hate you"?
Well, I think it's because they took him to waterhole right after the revelation.
So he must have been really frustrated, ashamed in a sense that he was associated with these people that he thought were charlatans.
It's kind of exhilarating in a sense. As you become more familiar with darkness, you come to realize that learning from others rather than just one person or from yourself allows your mind to be able to explore rather than just accept.
Nearly everything. The students around the table are all teaching each other all the time. Wow, right, that's a lot to ask. But at the same point, if you put good people together, amazing things happen.
In all honesty, I remember going home and I don't know how I can do math like this. You kind of get excited. Our teacher had given us the tools, but then we were actually the ones who found the answer.
I didn't go to a school like this. I had great teachers, don't get me wrong. Absorbed, read all this stuff and spit it right back out exactly the way they wanted me to. And then 6 months later, nothing. That's not actually why I'm here. I'm not an expert trying to teach you what happened in the past. I'm here to try to foster an environment where we're going to sort this out together.
It's in the silences where you find points of reflection, where that process starts to develop and you start to unpack a little bit more of who you are.
Tables made out of wood. It brings us all together. We're all facing somebody, so you have to make eye contact with someone. You have to talk to someone. Like getting the skill of listening, truly listening to somebody.
Hi, Mr. Aaron, and we're doing creative writing. And dude, one of the funniest exercises we did the other day was we were doing this excerption exercise.
Okay, so now you have that's what we were trying to again. Oh my goodness. You have to show this to your audience. I'll show it to Mama. Okay, so exciting.
And so we basically just put this rod through the magnet and just blow it through. And it was like, what?
I think Harkness just works. Harkness works in any class, in any subject. It's more important to learn than just get something right.
I think that final point is what we are really working on in this program. Now, Harkness, you can see there the table is the key feature. You see that wooden table. That's from a philanthropist in the United States who suggested to the Phillips Exeter School in the 1930s that they could develop a new program, a new pedagogy. He would help fund it. And the table, the Harkness table, is a feature of that. And that school runs all of its subjects through Harkness, which is not what we're doing, but we're intending to pilot it through humanities and to see how we can develop students and whether we can expand it into other subject areas. We're not going to have it always run by students because that's not where our students are coming from. So we're going to be working on developing that. But the pattern that you can see there, that traditional model of the teacher at the front of the classroom asking the students what they know is sometimes useful but it doesn't encourage the students to learn from each other or to learn those skills. And so around the table is an opportunity for them to speak with each other, to listen to each other. And already we're seeing that with some very early practice. The students are developing some of those skills. We've got a script for them to help them, where they seek to ask others what they might think or to oppose another view. So it's going to be bold and resilient. And we've got 2 classrooms that now are going to be redesigned. These are our 2. We have one now, we just received the table in one room yesterday, and we're waiting for the next table. So we have this beautiful timber table, and we have another one on its way in a room with timber panelling. We're changing the lighting in these rooms to not be that traditional school lighting. We have some pendant lights on the way. All of it's been a little bit delayed with COVID. So some of our craftspeople weren't able to complete the work on time, but the students, interestingly, the students were thrilled by the chairs. They were thrilled by the chairs with arms, but nonetheless, hopefully they'll move on from being thrilled by the chairs with arms, but they're immediately sensing that they're in a special program with this, and it's going to be different, and it feels different. So we're really excited. I'll just make a quick note on the name. We're hoping to use an Indigenous name for this program, and we've got one that we may have permission to use but not yet prepared to be using it, which is Kulila, which is from Pitjantjatjara language from Central Australia. We may well have a Wurundjeri name that's similar, that means the same thing, but it's a really good connection between both reconciliation, which as a school we're part of, and the fact that Kulila means listening, it actually means listening for understanding, which is a Pitjantjatjara word. So when people sit down and listen to each other to understand. And we're hoping a word like that will be given permission to use by Indigenous elders, and that will give title to it. And because we do Indigenous history and Australian history at part of Year 9, the students, we've told them, will be on that journey as well as the naming process to see how that goes. Okay. And I'm just going to finish is what we do with the 2 things. We map the conversations, and the students will eventually be doing this as well. So it shows us, and we've already done this already it shows the students perhaps who, at the moment, who is dominating the conversations and who isn't speaking, and makes them conscious of being aware that some people aren't contributing, and how can they bring those people into the conversation? How can they help them, and how can those other people be empowered? So we map this through the conversations. Already we've seen differences, and the students are really amazed by the difference in the dynamics. No, they never considered it before. What's really great is our first trial of this, the students were highly democratic in giving everyone a say. They went around the table, so we were mapping these loops, which is really nice. But already they've moved to different dynamics, and they're learning that, and they've got skills with that. And ultimately, the conversations aren't really much point unless they're dealing with real world things. And so these just are 3 questions that will have to be answered when the students have the knowledge. So they have to learn the knowledge in order to have these debates and discussions. Well, they're not debates, discussions. So we've been studying biomes, which is an area of geography study. And in a couple of weeks, they're going to have a conversation where they have to discuss why biomes, areas of the world are being destroyed, and is there anything that can be done to stop that, considering both natural processes and human-made processes. Now, these are big issues that scientists have to grapple with. They're not going to reach a conclusion on it, but they're going to be able to canvass all the different issues and validate whether the arguments are relevant or arguments aren't, or whether one person's point of view can progress their thinking or understanding. Are there viable solutions to global food security? We're not plucking these ideas out of the air. They're part of the curriculum, but we're framing them in different ways for students to understand them. And can our need for clothing, which we all have, can it be met without harm to the people in the environment? These are real world issues, and the students will be discussing that with the knowledge. So that's a brief, very disconnected overview in some ways, but speak to your daughters about this because they'll be bringing home stories about it. I hope, in a good way. And I'll speak to people afterwards if you'd like to talk a bit more. But I've spoken a little bit too long, and I'll leave now Summer her time to talk. And so I'll introduce someone of our Year 12 students to talk about her journey.
Thank you, Mr. Gilby. Year 9 was a pretty big experience for me, and I'm guessing it will be for your girls too. As they emerge from COVID lockdowns, and as you come to the terms with the fact that your sweet little girl is well and truly a hormonal teenager, I'm here to reassure you that she's going to have a fantastic year ahead, come what may. My journey at St. Cass started in Year 7. This was my first experience of an all-girls school, and my fears of girly princesses were quickly allayed. What I found was a warm, fun, academically rigorous environment that I could thrive in. There were so many great things on offer, and I wanted to try them all. I tried orchestra, not for me. School debating helped me win family arguments at the dinner table. But my real passion has always been sport. I was a triathlete. Who knew? And although I may not look like a rower, I found myself in the cox seat. In Year 8, I coxed because I was little. This is now something I dedicate 34 hours a week to. Not only do I love this ultimate team sport, I'm hoping this will help me to secure a place overseas to complete my studies. My point is, by encouraging your daughter to try what's on offer and step out of her comfort zone, it can open up so many opportunities, create new friendships, and build skills for a lifetime. It's been clear to me that the more I get involved, the more organised and disciplined I have become. I see this amongst my friends as well. There have been a lot of ups and a few downs in my school experience. Sometimes I have found the work really tough. Or there was the time I nearly crashed the $100,000 boat into Morell Bridge in front of a line of St. Cass parents. Or the time I airplayed double bass in orchestra because I'd forgotten the notes. But I've been able to turn to my teachers, friends, and often older girls for support. And now, these are all funny stories and part of what's helped me build resilience. Year 7 and 8 for me was a lot about trying everything. I participated in the school musicals, debating, public speaking, cross-country, community service, and student representative council. Year 8 can be a bit of a drama year for a lot of girls. Year 9 gets better. Year 9, I was fortunate enough to be selected for the exchange program and spent 4 months at St. George's Ascot in the UK, which was followed straight after by our year group Fiji trip. It was a year of eye-opening travel for me. But what it also meant was that I had to choose. Not only are we choosing our subjects, sports or co-curricular in Year 9, but we also begin to choose our subjects and what interests us. We begin to formulate an idea of where we want to go after school. Some girls already know what career they want to do. And for others, it's about keeping options open for as long as possible by holding on to subjects such as math methods. This was never my pathway. It was the first year of exams and school started to get a bit more serious. But don't worry, I had my fair share of fun. Year 10 and 11 was pretty disruptive with lockdowns. We suddenly heard a lot about unprecedented times and pivoting, a term I'd previously only used when playing netball. But we did pivot, and our teachers were amazing, keeping us engaged with our studies through the laptop screen. And of course, rowing kept up my connection and motivation. Year 11 for me was a year of learning and decision-making. I decided to accelerate in a Year 12 subject early. I decided to put my name forward for various leadership applications. And I decided I wished to continue to dedicate a lot of my time to rowing. I learned what it takes to push myself, how not to procrastinate, how to balance a demanding co-curricular load with my academics, and how to strive for what's important to me. St. Cath's encourages us to be bold, to learn from our mistakes, to try again. We are encouraged to push ourselves further. We are empowered to do the work and to dare to face our fears. When we are knocked down, be it in our sport or our grades or our well-being, we have each other. Our school friends, our teachers, our coaches, and our community. At St Catherine's, we have fostered an environment that celebrates success in every field, but it also supports us in our more difficult moments when things don't go as we hope. Being a small school, our classes are small. This allows room for discussion and ideas, and most of all, everyone has a chance to participate. Through my school journey, my amazing friends, teachers, and coaches, I've learned to be confident and back myself. A quote from Winnie the Pooh: "You are braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think." Thank you.
Thank you, Summer. Articulate, bright, and very independent. And Summer is really a representative of our Year 12 cohort this year. We really regard all the Year 12s as leaders, bold, independent, resilient, and creative. And we're really hoping for some particularly good things, particularly in the rowing, come towards the end of the term. I was having a chat to Summer just before, and we're a bit exciting with the season that's coming up, I think. So thank you, Summer. And thank you, Paul. As you can see, I think this program in the Year 9 Humanities is really something quite extraordinary. You saw classrooms that actually I don't consider look like normal classrooms, and what you wouldn't think also look like normal classrooms. It's a very exciting project, and we're pretty confident it's going to be very successful, I think. Already the girls are incredibly excited and incredibly engaged with the possibilities of the year. So we look with great enthusiasm about what might happen. I would encourage you as parents, because your daughters will be in those rooms, to have some conversations. And I know Paul would love to get some feedback from your perspective along the way. So from time to time, have a chat with your daughter about what you're doing and try and get beyond the what did you do today, not much, and see if you can get a tease a bit more out. I would hope actually that this humanities program, she will be bursting at the seams to talk about what she's doing in those classrooms, even though they look different. Another very exciting thing for us is the Black Box Theatre, which we are hoping will be ready by March. Is that, Mr. Brown, is that the schedule we're looking at the moment? That sounds good. Yeah, it sounds good. Sounds good. He's not saying that with any great confidence, is he? I did poke my head in there yesterday, and it's really coming along. And like most things at the moment, there's been a few delays with COVID and supplies of a few things, but it is going up along at great speed now. There's been a team of tradies there. Literally the week before we came back to school, one day I think I counted about 20 or 30 people wandering around doing various things associated with that project. And that is going to transform the performing arts in the school and provided a much needed space and in the school. It's going to be a wonderful facility when we have that at the start of March. Cross fingers. And I think James crossing fingers too. So what I thought I would leave you with tonight is that we've thought a great deal about what teaching and learning should look like for our students. And so this is a little film that's been made of one of our Year 10 girls, Ria, and I think it encapsulates what we are trying to achieve. And you might look at it and think, oh, this is one of those videos that schools make. But this is generally what we want our graduates to be like.